Israel's ban on the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, that's UNRWA, has come into effect. Protesters have been rallying against the organization outside its offices. Israel's ban covers UNRWA's operations in Israel and occupied East Jerusalem. It also prohibits Israeli authorities from having any contact with UNRWA in Gaza and in the occupied West Bank. Some context on UNRWA. The agency, a UN agency, was created in 1949 to support Palestinians who were forcibly displaced during the Nakba, or catastrophe. Today, it supports nearly 6 million refugees in 58 camps across Gaza, the occupied West Bank, and Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria, so across the region. As of last year, more than 500,000 children were enrolled in UNRWA's 709 schools. The agency also runs 140 primary healthcare facilities, and more than 30,000 Palestinians across the Middle East work for the agency. UNRWA also supports the right of Palestinians to return to their homeland as stipulated in a UN General Assembly resolution, a resolution which Israel rejects. Chris Gunness is former Director of Communications for UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. That's the full name of UNRWA. Chris, you're joining us from London. You've had, when you were working with UNRWA, you had your own run-ins with Israel. This was several years ago already, but Israel had already at the time accused UNRWA of being a collaborator of Hamas, as they are doing today, and that is their official rationale for shutting down UNRWA. So I wanted your thoughts on, today of all days, given that UNRWA, the ban has now come into effect.
Well, the tragedy of today is that UNRWA is the best partner for peace that Israel ever had, and UNRWA is the best expression of soft power that the American administration, that the Europeans ever had. That's the irony of today. If you look at the ceasefire in Gaza, which you've just been reporting on, you don't need for that to stick. You don't need 2 million hungry, angry, desperate people. And UNRWA services, 7,000 staff, have been feeding over hundreds of thousands, over 200,000 people since the war started. They've been bringing water and sanitation services to over 600,000, 14,000 health consultations every day. That's 2/3 of all the health provisions in Gaza. So in terms of making the ceasefire stick and bringing the hostages back home, UNRWA is absolutely a partner for peace, if only it were allowed to get on with its work. As far as the lies are concerned, I've always said that this accusation that the 12 UNRWA staff members took part in the attacks in October 15 months ago was the mother of all lies. Israel has produced no evidence whatsoever. There was the Catherine Colonna report. That was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Israel to present to an independent body all of the accusations against UNRWA, the textbooks, the teachers, the social media postings, the anti-Semitism. Colonna said they had produced no evidence, and that UNRWA was far better in terms of neutrality provisions and frameworks than any other UN agency. So it is an absolute tragedy that we're seeing these bits of illegal legislation, by the way. They violate international law, which come into force today.
Chris, is there perhaps some room left for UNRWA to operate specifically inside the Gaza Strip? And I ask you this, there's a little prelude to this question. UNRWA is banned by Israel on the basis of 2 Israeli laws. One, as we explained, bans UNRWA in the territory of Israel and in occupied East Jerusalem. The other law doesn't specifically ban it. It says that Israeli government and authorities can have no contact with UNRWA, the branch of UNRWA that is currently operating in Gaza. Does that leave any breathing room at all for UNRWA to... Yeah, go ahead.
My concern is that what's going to happen is that Israel effectively has to do nothing, and that UNRWA in Gaza and in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem also, will simply wither and crumble. It's unclear, for example, whether the bank account with Bank Leumi, the Israeli bank through which UNRWA buys and procures goods, food, for example, whether that bank account, which is frozen, will be unfrozen. It's unclear whether Israel will give visas. It's said it's not. It's seen the international staff from the UNRWA headquarters in East Jerusalem go across Allenbury Bridge. The Israelis have given every indication they're not going to allow them to come back. So I think there are grave doubts about whether UNRWA will be able to continue functioning at full capacity. It's clear that the international staff of UNRWA are in Gaza. They're determined to stay. God bless those people for doing what they're doing. But I have to say there are real doubts about whether UNRWA can carry on given these Israeli laws.
Who do you think fills the void then? If UNRWA isn't there to distribute food, water, basic necessities, primary health care, administer schools as it is, who do you think can fill that void? UNRWA has said multiple times there is no one that can do this.
Well, Israel's ambassador to the United Nations has said in a letter to the General Assembly, to the Secretary General, that Israel will do it. Now, it seems to be an insult to the collective intelligence of certainly the Security Council, the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and the international community that a state that's gone rogue and that's expelling a United Nations agency that's accused of genocide in the world's highest court, and where the ICC has arrest warrants out against the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister. As I said, it seems like a real insult to the collective intelligence of the international community that Israel would be providing services. And my big concern, A, is that certainly in East Jerusalem, where about 65,000 UNRWA refugees are dependent on UNRWA services, that they're going to be facing a real crisis. But in Gaza also, UNRWA has over 1 million people that it distributes food to. It's doing water and sanitation services in just about 100 UNRWA shelters. It's done that to 600,000 people in the war. And my concern is that those services are going to collapse. And I don't see WFP, the World Food Programme, the World Health Organization, they are tiny compared with UNRWA. UNRWA before the war had about 11,000 staff in Gaza. These other agencies had only a few hundred. And add to that the infrastructure of UNRWA, the network of food warehouses, of food distribution centers, the dozens and dozens of trucks and vehicles, the staff to distribute food. Only UNRWA has that. Now, I would say, someone's got to do it. Mass starvation has broken out. And I have to say that if we're going to prevent mass starvation breaking out and going any further, only UNRWA can do that. And by the way, after the 2014 war, when I was in UNRWA, the UN Mine Action Service, which cleared massive amounts of unexploded ordnance, they were heavily dependent on UNRWA's infrastructure, UNRWA's large engineering department. And given that 10% of everything that flew in that war in 2014 remained unexploded, UNRWA is going to be absolutely integral to the task of clearing the mines that lie under the unexploded ordnance that lie under some 50 million tons of rubble.
Chris Gunness, former Director of Communications at UNRWA, thank you very much for joining us on the Al Jazeera News Hour.
My pleasure.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.